course, greetings to all of my wonderful intellectuals. Like always, I am Quita, aka Belasian Quita, and this is Sin TV, of course, on the indieauthority.com. I wanted to bring to you a unique angle, and this is something that I feel that people really have been more concerned about in regards to the education of children, because a major concern to me is that in some educational institutions there's still this idea of color blindness, when in reality we all realize our cultural differences as we grow older, as well as we see this crucial development, especially in middle school and high school as well. But this was a story that I found from NewYorkMag.com or NYMag.com. And this is an actual interesting question. Can racism be stopped in the third grade? So I will have a link below today's video with the article, and I highly recommend you read this extensive article because it has some really good information, especially things I didn't know about kids and how they view their racial identity. So I'm going to read to you a snippet of this article and then come in with my, of course, commentary, letting you know how I feel about today's question. The form arrived in an email attachment on Friday after winter break. What is your race? It asked. Then beneath that, a census-style list: African American / Black, Asian / Pacific Islander, Latino or Latina, multiracial, white, and not sure. The email, signed by the principal of Fieldson Lower School, urged parents to talk about these categories with their children at home because the next week in school, the kids would have to check the box that fit them best. I know that there may be some nervous feelings about this program. The email concluded, but I am confident once you hear more details about it, the value and importance of this work will become clear. The parents at Lower, as it's called, are big-hearted, high-maintenance, high-achieving group. They are also, by the standards of the New York City private school universe, exceedingly liberal. We'll come back to that. Educators and social workers, as well as hedge fund tycoons. They love the school and trust it mostly, but this communication seized their attention. I was like, wait, what? Remembers one mother. Another quizzed her 11-year-old daughter as they were driving. We have to go into our race groups, was how the girl explained it. The mother hoped that her daughter had misunderstood. So the article continues to go on to talk about this school and how they are making it a mandatory thing for these students to get into these race groups in order to have discussions about racial identity and talk about things like racism and prejudice and so forth. Now, this is how I feel about this particular topic, and with, of course, the key question today: can racism be stopped in the third grade? Now, third grade, as I remembered it, I didn't really care about race, to be honest with you. I really didn't care because these people were my friends. Sometimes, to be honest, yes, I knew, we were culturally different, physically different, but it didn't matter to me because we all wanted to do one thing in third grade, and that was to have a great imagination and play around and have fun. Racism for me growing up really did not become an issue until I got into middle school and high school. And then once you're kind of going through puberty, yeah, you start noticing changes. You start noticing your friend, is going from having, Raisin Bran, to Bran Flakes, if you know what I mean. But all jokes aside, I think racism is something it's good to talk about, but I think what's really crucial is when it's the kid coming to you as a parent to address it. Then I think that's when you really need to have that discussion. I think that putting kids in racial groups is already, to me personally, adding the fire to this color blindness theory. And also it adds fire to racism in general, because if you're separating these kids by their racial identity, then it's kind of making them learn the things that you're trying to, in a way, you're trying to make sure it's counterproductive. That's the problem that I have with this school's particular program. It's not the fact, I don't see anything wrong with teaching kids about racism and prejudice from a young age. I just think there has to be a better way of going at it, because at some schools they're teaching these young kids colorblind, theory. And no one is colorblind. Obviously, you see me and you know there's something different about me. You may not know that I'm African, but you still do see some differences. And I think that when you're starting with kids in 3rd grade, and what the article later on mentioned, and what I thought was really interesting, is that kids as young as between 6 to 9 years old, because of what's going on with things like social injustice issues and the type of media exposure that these kids are going through, they're already noticing these things already. I mean, I think sometimes as adults, we underestimate, the young kids, and we underestimate this younger generation when they're going through a different type of racism that's really heads on. I mean, yeah, the older generations, of course, with civil rights and women's rights and all of that, they were part of the counterculture. We're going through currently our counterculture, which includes things like, everyone's colorblind, everybody's accepting, we accept interracial unions, and there's a lot of falsitude that's going on, and that is getting kind of mixed in and contrived with what's actually the truth. We do see racial differences. People are in interracial unions. Yes, they know they're in an interracial union, but you get to a point where, yeah, you just accept each other for who you are. And when it comes to the school district, this is just my suggestion. Don't make it mandatory, because what I've noticed in my studies because one area that I like to focus on is what's called multicultural requirements. And what that is a lot of colleges require students to go to diversity events in order to diversify their mindset. And these are all things that are pre-programmed, okay? It's not always something like, let's have a discussion or let's have a panel. But it's usually when they do these programs, it's not in racial groups per se, depending on the program. I personally feel here are my suggestions. Number 1, the school district should make this a multicultural platform, meaning that all the students should be able to get together and talk. Okay, when you start separating the African American students, you start separating the Asian students, you're only going to get a one-sided perspective. And those are the things that fuel racism. Those are the things that fuel stereotypes. Those are the things that fuel prejudice, okay? People are going to have their own prejudices, and people are going to, see things in the way they want to see it because it's through their cultural lens. But how you change racist ideals is when you're in an environment that's not conducive to what you're accustomed to. So if these students are being separated into racial groups, and it's mandatory, they're not, and they're young, they're not necessarily going to have that focus. Now, I know different schools will have different ways of how they discipline their children, and how different schools have different ways of functioning, and how the students, because every student has different behavior. I just think the key thing, about can racism be stopped? No. I mean, there's a viral video of a young black girl saying, she was crying to her mom about how, why, this white girl said because she was black, she didn't want to play with her, and they were young. So yeah, racism can occur to all different age ranges. But what sometimes racial, and that's something we have to be careful, and something that I've realized as someone who is a multicultural educator in training, of course, is that yes, I've lived through certain things that are racist, but I was one of those people where I actually, I thought about color blindness, like, oh yeah, multiracial, color blindness. No, there's no such thing as color blindness. Color blindness is an excuse for blanketing the topics like racism and prejudice, and really understanding that we do have differences. So I really hope that this school really realizes that they need to kind of deal with this on a level of making sure that all the students feel inclusive. Okay, that's what racial inclusion is. That's what cultural inclusion is that we all share our stories on the same platform. And guess what? Those 3rd graders, will realize that, yeah, there are cultural differences, and in the end, there's nothing wrong with that. So let me know, what do you think? Do you think racism can be stopped with these type of programs at the third grade level? Or do you think this is something, I personally feel it should be ongoing, that these students should meet up as they go through the system from, third grade, they go into middle school, they go into high school, and then when they graduate, they come together and have a symposium of different topics revolving around the things that they addressed when they were younger and how they have changed because of it. That is how you stop racism, okay? That is how you, I would not necessarily say stop in a way, but that's how you kind of bring people to the awareness of different cultural differences and societal understanding in general. So let me know what you think. Of course, you can always leave your comments below. And remember to stay classy and don't be trashy.